British comedian Tracey Ullman hosted a new sketch comedy series on the Fox network, including animated shorts based around the average American family, The Simpsons. Animator Matt Groening created a dysfunctional family at odds with the wholesome fare often found on American TV at the time, and named the characters after his own family: Father Homer, Mother Marjorie, sisters Lisa and Maggie. He thought that naming the son Matt might be a little too on the nose, though, and so Bart Simpson was born. After 3 seasons as a recurring sketch on The Tracey Ullman Show, The Simpsons became a primetime show in its own right. And Everton won their second league title in 3 years, sealing the title with a 1-0 away win at Norwich City. It was Everton's 9th league title and remains their last at the time of recording. Leicester City, Manchester City and Aston Villa were all relegated to the second division, while further down the pyramid, Scarborough became the first club to secure automatic promotion from the conference to the league following the end of the elective membership system. The F1 gang arrived in Europe for the San Marino Grand Prix back up to full strength, as Guy Ligier had arranged a supply of Megatron-branded BMW engines for the rest of the year. The Ligier and Arrows teams had agreed to share the supply of engines and share the development, with Ligier concentrating on the electronic aspect and Arrows the mechanical aspect, and both were hoping that the cooperation would bear fruit. The Larousse-Calmels team made their debut, and Ozella would run a second car as a one-off for local rookie Gabriele Tarquini, taking an old chassis for the weekend. March, for their part, had their dedicated F1 chassis, the 871, available for Ivan Capelli, or at least it would be once they'd finished building it in the pits, and Leighton House CEO Akira Akagi was at Imola to watch it go. Or so he hoped, because there were now 27 entries, so somebody would be missing out. Son of a kart track owner, young Gabriele got an early start in racing and went on to be a fine kart racer, winning Italian, European and world titles before stepping up into Formula 3 via the CSIA Racing School in Vallelunga. His first attempt with Coloni lasted just 3 races, but he won more karting titles and tried Formula 3000 instead, this time coming 6th in the championship in his first season, as well as competing at Le Mans. A test drive with Benetton followed, then the opportunity to move into Formula 1 as Ozella were looking for a pay driver to kickstart their European campaign. Qualifying got underway on Friday and saw a spectacular accident for Nelson Piquet, whose Williams suddenly snapped sideways in Tamburello and threw him into the wall at high speed, completely demolishing the car. As Nelson was taken off to hospital for a checkup, Patrick Head had a look at the car. Teams had already been noticing tyres blistering quickly, and when Head suggested Piquet might have had a sudden flat, Goodyear acted quickly to withdraw all their tyres and ship in a new compound overnight, at great expense and despite it being May Day weekend with few Italian customs agents on duty. Piquet himself said he felt fully fit, just a sore ankle which he could easily race with, but Professor Sid Watkins, the FIA's medical delegate who had the final say, ordered him not to race to be on the safe side in case of concussion. After his retirement, Nelson admitted that he'd never been quite the same after his accident, sometimes suffering double vision or persistent headaches, but fearing his driving days being brought to a premature end, he'd hidden this from both Watkins and his employers for the remainder of his driving career and secretly visited hospitals for treatment. For now, though, he would spend the rest of the weekend driving a microphone for Italian television. Piquet had set the fastest time on Friday despite his crash, and only Senna and Mansell could beat it on Saturday, Senna in his 16th career pole and Mansell in his 16th front row start, as it happened. With Nelson's withdrawal, it would now be Alain Prost who lined up 3rd, with Theo Fabi 4th, and then the Ferraris 5th and 6th. Johansson in the second McLaren was 8th, just behind Patrese Brabham, with the 2 Arrowses 10th and 11th despite all kinds of problems. Arnoux was 14th and Ghinzani 20th in the newly re-engined Ligier Megatrons, while the non-turbos were again led by a Tyrrell, and Alio qualified the new Larousse Lola well at its first time of asking. Akira Akagi would watch his new car start from 24th, while Gabriele Tarquini in his first race struggled, setting a time nearly 18 seconds off pole on Friday and no time at all on Saturday, but would still start from the back of the grid thanks to Piquet's absence. Sunday dawned bright and talk turned to prospects for the race. Tyres had already been a major factor in Brazil, and the sudden change of compounds here had certainly thrown a real curveball to the teams, but Imola was also a thirsty circuit and teams would have to be careful not to run dry before the end. Alain Prost had crossed the line first for the last 3 years. even if his 1985 win had been taken away and given to Elio De Angelis after scrutineering, so he was a hot favourite again today due to his smooth driving and tyre and fuel management skills. So 26 cars lined up on the grid for the start, but when the lights went green, Brundle, Boutsen and Cheever all stalled and the start was scrubbed. And then, as the cars reassembled for a second go, Arnoux' suspension, which had been iffy all weekend, finally failed, and he would take no further part, while Nakajima's battery died and he would have to have a new one fitted and start from the pit lane, which turned out to be 3 laps later than everybody else. Eventually, though, everyone who was left was ready to go, as Senna became the first driver in an actively suspended car to start on pole position, for a slightly reduced 59-lap race. Everyone got away for the second start as Senna held his lead, with Mansell tight behind him and Prost still third, but he had both Ferraris right behind him, Alboreto having got ahead of his new teammate, and quickly dropped behind the leading pair as he defended himself. Behind them were Patrese and Johansson, then a slow-starting Fabi. By the end of the first lap, Senna had Mansell crawling all over him, and the Williams went past as they came into Villeneuve, and a little way behind them, Fabi got back ahead of Johansson. Prost, meanwhile, had got away from Alboreto and was pressuring Senna, while Mansell romped away to build up quite a lead. Prost took second off Senna on lap 5 and set off in pursuit of Mansell, while Senna's mirrors were now full of scarlet Ferrari. Prost began to slowly chip away at Mansell's lead as the Ferraris followed Senna waiting for an opening, and Patrese began to close up on the 3 of them, going well in the new Brabham. A few laps later, to a roar from the crowd, Alboreto surged past Senna into third and began to quickly pull away, but Berger's attempts to follow his teammate past were stymied by Senna's defensive driving. Berger dropped right back from Senna with engine problems, and as Alboreto and Senna came up to take Fabre and Nakajima, suddenly they passed a cruising McLaren. It was Prost, and a roar went up from the crowd as that promoted Alboreto into second place. Further back, Berger was struggling with his engine, and Patrese got it all kinds of sideways under braking, but forced his Brabham through into fourth, followed shortly afterwards by Johansson. Berger pulled in to retire after 16 laps, with what turned out to be electrical gremlins, so the order was now Mansell leading Alboreto by about 9 seconds, then Senna, Patrese, Johansson and Fabi, with Boutsen 7th and Warwick 8th, and the leading Benetton soon came into the pits for a long stop and dropped down the order. The new March's debut ended after 18 laps with an engine failure, Capelli pulling up behind Prost's abandoned McLaren. He'd been 2 laps down already, so Mansell was already on lap 20, about a third distance, and was still pulling away from Alboreto, who was now being reeled back in by Senna. Mansell peeled into the pit on lap 22 for a pit stop, a bit earlier than planned as one of his wheel balancing weights had come loose, but even a very quick stop dropped him back to fourth. But for the fans at the track, the most important thing was that Alboreto had gone through into the lead. A Ferrari led at Imola, and the man who'd been at the wheel last time that happened, Stefan Johansson, was now in the hated McLaren and was busy defending third place from a recovering Mansell. Alboreto had Senna right on his gearbox though, and when the Ferrari stopped after 3 laps at the front, Senna regained the lead, and it was Michele's turn to drop to fourth. Mansell had by now got past Johansson and was rapidly bearing down on the Lotus, with Riccardo Patrese now up to third behind him. Mansell retook the lead as Senna pitted just before half-distance, and the Lotus team turned him around in a brilliant 7.54 seconds, rejoining third and just ahead of Alboreto, whose stop had been about 3 seconds slower. Behind Mansell, meanwhile, Patrese was going great guns and was just over 2.3 seconds behind and closing. He hadn't stopped yet, but still the new Brabham seemed to be working much better for him than last year's. Pascal Fabre had a spin in the AGS at Rivazza, which caused Alio to take avoiding action over the grass, but he stayed out of the sand trap, kept his engine running, and was able to return to the track. Meanwhile, Patrese had got within 2 seconds of Mansell by the time he made his own late tyre stop, though he dropped back a little after being balked by Danner in the old Zack-speed. When he finally did stop on lap 37, he dropped to fourth behind a terrific scrap between Senna and Alboreto, now over second place, and just ahead of a charging Johansson. So at 2/3 distance, Mansell led by 18 seconds, and the Senna-Alboreto scrap was making its way through traffic, as De Cesaris had his second spin of the race, this time a terminal one. His teammate Patrese, meanwhile, had sped up, and when Senna and Alboreto were slowed a little lapping Cheever's arrows, he was able to catch them, with Johansson still in hot pursuit and looking for a way past too. A rare error from Senna going into Acqua Minerale allowed Alboreto to barge through, and Patrese nearly got through into the bargain, which elicited another cheer from the crowd. While the cameras watched Alboreto cross the line second to applause from the pit wall, Patrese also snuck past Senna, then blasted straight past Alboreto into the bargain. The Tifosi was stunned into silence, and maybe Patrese could feel a little satisfaction after being cheered for crashing out of the lead in 1983. Johansson, meanwhile, came into the pits for a distinctly leisurely stop, all of which meant that after 44 laps with 15 still to go, Mansell led by 21 seconds from Patrese, who was pulling away from Alboreto and Senna, with the Benettons of Boutsen and Fabi in 5th and 6th, and some distance behind again. Senna retook 3rd as Fabi began a charge, setting fastest lap as he took lumps out of the lead of his new teammate Boutsen in 5th. He took the place when Boutsen toured in to retire with engine problems, as Senna caught Patrese, Alboreto still in tow, as all three of them lapped the Tyrrells. Patrese in fact was in trouble, his alternator was cutting out on him. Suddenly he slowed, and not only did the Senna-Patrese battle pass him, but so did the lapped Tyrrell, as his car stuttered across the line. He got it moving again and repassed Palmer, who was pulling over with a broken clutch. All of which promoted Fabi to 4th, with Johansson the next to pass the stricken Brabham. Teo put up another fastest lap on lap 51, but while the caption was still on the screen, a puff of smoke appeared to indicate a blown turbo, and that was the end of his race. So Johansson moved up into 4th, with Warwick 5th and Patrese still clinging on to 6th for the moment. Derek Warwick, who hadn't scored any points since his Renault days, wouldn't score any here either, as his fuel tank ran dry with 2 laps to go. But one Britain's misfortune was another's good luck, as Martin Brundle inherited the place, just as Mansell put another lap on his countryman and began his final lap. Nigel Mansell won his 8th career Grand Prix in dominant style, 27.5 seconds ahead of second-placed Ayrton Senna, and Alboreto took a popular and relieved 3rd place. Johansson was 4th, Martin Brundle took Zakspeed's first ever points finish in 5th, and Nakajima inherited 6th just before running out of fuel himself to score a point in his second ever race. Danner's other Zakspeed was 7th, Streff 8th and top of the 3.5 litre class again to give Ken Tyrrell a nice present on his 63rd birthday. Patrese was classified 9th, scant reward after a fine race. Alio took 2nd in the 3.5 litre category on his team's debut. Warwick and Caffey both ran out of fuel, and Fabre was still gamely plugging away 6 laps down to again take 3rd in the Jim Clark Cup. So, Nigel Mansell went to the top of the leaderboard by dint of that extra point from Rio, as Prost failed to score, while Stefan Johansson moved into 3rd after 2 solid drives. Williams and McLaren were even Stevens in the Constructors' Championship, while in the 3.5 litre category, it was Streff and Tyrrell who dominated proceedings so far.